What if the most sophisticated warships in the world suddenly went blind, and nobody could explain why? That question haunted American commanders for 11 straight days, and the answer, when it finally came, would send a team of Marines into the dark, onto enemy territory, with no margin for error. If you've never seen a mission like this described the way it actually felt, not cleaned up, not glorified, just honest and real, stay with me, because this story has layers that the official records will never show you. Before we go further, if this kind of content keeps you up at night in the best possible way, hit that subscribe button right now. Share this with someone who loves real military stories. And if you're already here watching, drop a like. It costs you nothing, and it means everything to this channel. Now let's go. The Strait of Hormuz. Say that name to any Navy commander in the world, and you'll see their expression change. This is not just a stretch of water. It is the single most important maritime choke point on Earth. Every single day, roughly a fifth of the world's entire oil supply moves through it. Warships, cargo vessels, tankers, they all squeeze through a passage that, at its narrowest point, is only about 21 miles wide. Now imagine navigating that passage without being able to trust your instruments. That is exactly what American ships started experiencing. GPS signals that should have been rock solid began drifting. Navigation systems gave readings that didn't match reality. Radio signals came in garbled or wrong. Sailors who had trained their entire careers to rely on these systems were suddenly looking at screens that lied to them. A warship without accurate navigation in those waters is not just inconvenienced, it is dangerous. The Strait of Hormuz is surrounded by shallow water, rocks, and the constant heavy traffic of other vessels. One wrong reading at the wrong moment could mean a collision, a grounding, casualties, maybe worse. The intelligence community went to work immediately. Satellite imagery was analyzed frame by frame. Signal specialists started pulling apart every frequency coming out of that region, looking for anything out of place. Analysts worked through nights, comparing data, running models, eliminating possibilities one by one. What they found was both simple and alarming. Someone was deliberately jamming the navigation systems of American ships, and the signal was coming from a specific location, a small island called Larak, sitting right at the edge of the strait, firmly within Iranian territorial waters. Satellite images showed a building on the island with antenna arrays on the roof. Equipment that had no business being at a weather outpost or a lighthouse. This was a dedicated electronic warfare facility, purpose-built to send American ships blind. Now the decision-makers faced a problem that had no clean answer. You couldn't bomb it. An airstrike on Iranian territory would be an act of war. The diplomatic and military consequences could spiral into something uncontrollable. You couldn't ignore it. Every day the jamming continued. Ships were at risk. Sailors could die. Not from enemy fire, but from a collision, a grounding, an accident caused by corrupted instruments. And you couldn't just wait and hope it stopped. It had already been going on for 11 days. The only real option was precise, fast, and deniable. Send in a ground force, take out the facility, get out before anyone could respond. The unit selected for this was the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, the 22nd MEU. These are not infantry soldiers in the traditional sense. They are a rapid response force specifically designed to project power from ships, to go somewhere fast, do something specific, and leave. They train constantly for exactly this kind of mission. A tight objective, limited time, complete discipline required. The plan was clean on paper. Fly in on MV-22 Ospreys, an aircraft unlike anything else in the American arsenal. It takes off and lands vertically, like a helicopter. Then it tilts its engines forward and flies at speeds no helicopter can match. Quiet, fast, and versatile enough to land on a rooftop if the mission demands it. In this case, the mission absolutely demanded it. The plan called for landing directly on the roof of the facility. No long ground approach that would give defenders time to react. Hit the top of the building and fight downward, floor by floor, until the jamming equipment was destroyed. 2 days. That's how long the Marines spent preparing. They studied photographs until they could close their eyes and walk the building from memory. They ran through their assignments over and over. Who covers what corridor? Who takes which stairwell? How the wounded get moved? Where the equipment they needed to destroy was located in the building. Every man knew his job. Every team knew their teammates. What they didn't know, what nobody on that ship knew, was that on Larak Island, someone had been preparing too. His name was Colonel Reza Shirazi, a Revolutionary Guard officer, experienced, methodical, and deeply instinctively suspicious of coincidence. For several days he had noticed things: American aircraft circling in the far distance at the edge of visibility, satellite paths that repeated too predictably, signal intelligence reports that suggested someone was paying very close attention to his island. Shirazi drew his own conclusions. He couldn't know the exact timing. He couldn't know the exact method. But he was certain enough that something was coming, and he acted on that certainty. He pulled his garrison, the soldiers assigned to guard the facility, out of their outside barracks and moved them into the building itself. Every floor covered, every corridor manned. He spread his defenses throughout the structure, turning the building into a multi-layered trap. And then, satisfied that his men were positioned, he did something else, something that would matter enormously before the night was over. He got on a boat and left the island. The Ospreys lifted off from the deck of their ship well before sunrise. No running lights. The pilots flew entirely on night vision goggles, the world rendered in pale green and shadow. The sea below was flat and still. Inside the aircraft, the Marines sat in silence. Some of them prayed quietly. Some controlled their breathing deliberately, slowing their heart rates by force of habit and training. All of them waited. Larak Island came into view, small, dark. The building was visible against the sky, and even in the dark, the antenna arrays on its roof were clearly outlined. The Ospreys came in low and fast. The sound of the rotors was swallowed by the wind before it could carry any real distance. They hit the roof hard. The ramps dropped, and the Iranians on that roof opened fire. The first seconds were exactly what combat always is. Chaos in miniature. Muzzle flashes. Shouting. The deep, chest-felt crack of rifles. The Marines pushed through it. Training doesn't eliminate fear, but it overrides hesitation. You move to cover, you identify the threat, you return fire, you keep moving. The rooftop was cleared, but that was just the beginning. The building below was waiting. The stairwells were narrow and dark. The Marines moved in pairs, one covering while the other advanced. Every door was a question with an unknown answer. Shirazi had done his job well. Each floor offered fresh resistance. Small rooms, close quarters, the kind of fighting where distance is measured in feet, not yards, and decisions happen in fractions of seconds. On the third floor, a squad leader took a hit. Not fatal, but he went down. The sergeant directly behind him stepped forward without being told, took command, kept the unit moving. That is what the training produces. Not individuals who need to be told what to do, but people who already know. The second floor was the hardest. The Iranians had built a strong defensive position using equipment racks, metal server cabinets, electronics housings, dense and heavy. Excellent cover. The firefight there lasted 6 minutes. In a real engagement, 6 minutes is an enormous amount of time. People who have never been in a fight tend to underestimate it. Every second of those 6 minutes was dangerous and loud and costly. When it was over, the floor was clear. But now the mission was running behind. Every extra minute on that island increased the risk. Daylight was approaching. Iranian reinforcement could be inbound. The window was closing. They found the jamming equipment on that floor. A long room lined with racks of electronics. Indicator lights still blinking. Screens still glowing. Somewhere under the ocean nearby, ships were still being fed bad data, still navigating partially blind. The plan was to place timed explosive charges, set them, and walk out. Simple and clean. Except the explosives team had taken a casualty, and in the chaos of the floor-by-floor fighting, the bag with the charges had been lost. No one could account for it. The timer charges were gone. 15 seconds of silence followed that realization. The kind of silence that arrives when a plan has completely come apart, and everyone in the room knows it, and nobody yet has an answer. Then a corporal named James Holloway stepped forward, 22 years old, from a small town in Tennessee. Before enlisting, he had spent 2 years working in his uncle's electrical repair shop. He had learned which wires carried power and which didn't. He had learned what happened when you cut the wrong one. More importantly, he had learned not to be afraid of the ones you could cut safely, and how to tell the difference. He looked at the equipment racks. He traced the thick bundles of cables running from the racks up to the antenna feeds. He pulled out his knife. His sergeant grabbed his arm. "Those cables could be live." Corporal Holloway nodded. "Yes, Sergeant." Then he pulled his arm free and went to work. The cables were thick, heavy industrial insulation wrapped around transmission lines designed to carry enormous amounts of signal power. Each cut took real effort. Sparks jumped. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the physical work of cutting through material that wasn't meant to be cut. On the 5th cable, the screens in the room flickered. On the 6th, they went dark. The hum of the equipment died. The indicator lights stopped blinking. The room was suddenly quiet in a way it hadn't been since the Marines arrived. Thousands of miles away, on ships threading through the Strait of Hormuz, navigation systems came back online, GPS locked in, radios cleared. Sailors looked at their screens and couldn't quite believe what they were seeing. Everything was working again, clean and precise and reliable. Holloway stood up. His hands were bleeding in 2 places where cable insulation had cut through his skin during the work. He looked at his sergeant. His sergeant looked at the dark screens. Then back at Holloway. "Good work, Marine. That was all. That was everything. Now, real quick. I want to ask you something directly. If you made it this far into this story, you are exactly the kind of person this channel was built for. Serious? Curious? You actually want to understand these things, not just skim headlines. So do this for me. Share this video with one person right now, not later. Right now, while it's in your head. And if you haven't subscribed yet, you're missing every story we put out. Fix that. One tap. Let's keep going. The withdrawal was fast and disciplined. Up the stairs, back to the roof. The Ospreys came in low, one at a time, rotors cutting the pre-dawn air. The wounded were loaded first, then everyone else. The last Marine counted heads, confirmed the number, and stepped on board. The aircraft tilted their engines and accelerated into the dark sky. Below them, Lyric Island fell away. The building sat silent and dark on the rocky ground. No signal coming from those antennas now. But here's where the story has one more turn. One more piece that rarely gets mentioned. Colonel Shirazi, watching from a small boat offshore, had seen everything. Through binoculars in the darkness, he watched the Ospreys land on the roof. He heard the distant pop and crack of the firefight. He watched the lights inside the building go dark one by one. He understood what that meant, and he smiled. 6 months earlier, at his direction, his engineers had installed a second system, a backup, smaller than the main facility, hidden in a different building on a different part of the island. Not as powerful, but fully functional. A failsafe, built specifically for the scenario he was now watching unfold. He had planned for this. He had always planned for this. Even as his main facility was being destroyed, he believed he still had a card to play. That backup system never activated. Not that night. Not ever. 3 days before the Marines boarded those Ospreys, an American signals intelligence team had detected something unusual. The undersea power cable supplying the backup facility, running from the Iranian mainland along the seafloor, was cut. Silently. In complete darkness. Without a single shot fired. 2 days before the raid even launched. Shirazi didn't know this yet as he watched from his boat. He was still calm, still confident. It would be hours before he realized that the backup he had so carefully constructed was already dead. The ships in the strait sailed on through the morning, their instruments sharp and accurate. Corporal Holloway returned to the ship with bandaged hands and a particular kind of quiet that settles over a person after something real. There would be no parade. Most people would never know his name. The mission would not be announced from podiums or written into mainstream headlines. It happened in the dark. It ended in the dark. That is the nature of this kind of work. But on every American ship that transited the Strait of Hormuz that morning, the screens told the truth. The GPS was strong. The radios were clean. Sailors did their jobs and went home safe. Because somewhere between a broken plan and a closed window, a young man from Tennessee decided 6 cables were not going to stop him. And behind him, invisible, uncelebrated, methodical, every single one of them did their job. Not for recognition, not for a headline. Because the ships in that strait needed to be able to see. That is what they do. That is what it costs. And that is why it matters.